Welcome to Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere with your host, Chris Parker.
And welcome back to Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere. This is Chris Parker, and I have Jonathan Zuck on for a conversation. And we're going to have a lot of fun because we both have some similar backgrounds in IT and are filmmakers and are proud alumni and contributors to the 48-Hour Film Project. And I want to know from people afterwards, maybe in the comments if you can, who has the most sexy podcast radio voice, because Jonathan sounds marvelous. So with that introduction, Jonathan, can you share us what is it that you do and why are you doing what you do?
Well, I've done a lot of things over the course of my life, but what I'm primarily doing right now is trying to break into the movie industry in Hollywood. I've made 20 plus short films and 3 features, but none of them have involved any known actors and stars, any celebrities. And it's become clear that the path to success in the movie business is to lead with your cast. And so I'm here to get a movie made with some people you've heard of in hopes of taking my filmmaking to the next level.
And why? So that is a
Why?
ambitious goal. You know, many people have done that before. So what's driving you? What
Sure.
drove you to LA?
Well, I mean, I've been an amateur filmmaker for a very long time. I made my first feature film when I was 14 years old on a Super 8 camera that was like a spoof of a James Bond movie, because I was a big James Bond fan as a kid. And so I've always been intrigued by filmmaking and by story making generally. I've been involved in theater and done other types of storytelling, but making movies has always been a passion of mine. And so now I'm trying to wrap my head around the harsher realities of filmmaking and the business aspects of filmmaking in order to take that love and that passion of filmmaking up a notch. Back in 2000, I took on a job that was very, very taxing, as a lobbyist for the software industry. And I basically went 3 years without even really taking any weekends off from working. And so I decided to clear my head by going to film school. So that was my first sort of dip into taking what I was doing to another level. And I've been experimenting and learning craft ever since. And now it's time to learn the business.
Outstanding. And it sounds like because your previous projects, if I understood it, is you've been more in a directorial role. And
That's right.
The creative versus commercial part. So are you moving more into a producing role or a hybrid of those?
No, I'm still a director at heart, always in search of the perfect producer for sure. They can be hard to find, but I really do love telling people what to do. So I don't think I can get out of the directorial role. But I'm trying to make connections with producers and to get a film made, a deal made in Hollywood. I think very few films are made in Hollywood anymore. The deals are made here, but then they're shot wherever the best tax incentives exist. So my next feature is very likely to be shot in Tampa, Florida, but the deal to make it will be made here.
How has that gone? So without revealing any inside details of it, but did you write the script? Like, how did it go from ideation to package to greenlight? Was that something you just showed up in LA and there's a bunch of money lined up at the outside of LAX and they're saying,
well,
okay.
Ironically, there sort of was, right? I have a friend here who's a successful indie producer. He's made maybe 50 films or something like that. So he's motivated to get me a job as a director on a bigger project than the ones that I've been able to sort of self-finance. And he handed me a script that had accomplished the impossible. The script had taken a project from green light to yellow light. And so there was a project that had a treatment that had been greenlit. And then once the writer wrote the script, it became yellow lit. And so he handed me the script and asked me to rewrite it in hopes of it being re-greenlit. And that is what took place. It's basically like a kind of a spring break sex comedy about lawyers, actually, that takes place in Tampa, Florida. And I'm excited to shoot it. But of course, right at the time it got greenlit, everything was red lit by the pandemic. So I'm looking forward to trying to get the thing going up and running again once our herd immunity has gotten to sufficient levels.
Yeah, I think we need that herd immunity around the world. What changed to go from yellow to green? Meaning, did you attach some names to it, or did you rewrite the script, or
no, there
what was
aren't names attached. This what's one of the things that I've discovered through my relationship with this producer is that the way that movies get funded is completely variable, right? Very often it can be driven because you've managed to get cast associated with the film, but other times it could just be the ego of the funders, and this is one of those instances. There was a movie that was that they made in a swingers resort in Jamaica, and it was mostly funded, or at least 50% funded, by the owner of the resort, who just wanted his resort to be in a movie. And so now there's a friend of his who owns multiple businesses in Tampa, who's jealous that a movie got made about his friend's business in Jamaica and now wants a movie made in Tampa. And so 50% of the funding for this movie is coming from a businessman in Tampa who wants his businesses showcased in the movie. And so the task then was to write a script. I mean, this is very backwards in a way, to write a script that made use of these locations and to satisfy his needs. And then the script had to be good enough then to attract other funders to the project. But so the two big things that I think attract funders is cast and other funders, right? And so if you can find one or the other, you can often get the project off the ground. And then what happened is that the guy they hired to write the script just created a script that was too convoluted and just didn't find it supposed to be a comedy. And so he handed it to me. He said, "This is your chance to helm a movie if you can take this script and turn it into something that will find funny." And apparently I accomplished that. So that hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be able to shoot this before too long.
I having produced a couple indie features myself, I think it's mostly just luck and relations that is mostly than anything else, because all these other people that are selling how to get your package funded and stuff, and like you just got to go for it and keep dialing for dollars, and if you got someone who's going to champion, just run with that. So
well, at the indie level, I think there is no formula, right? I mean, the old joke turns out to be more true than you realize, which is if you know a rich dentist, they're the most willing to invest in a movie. And it could be because dentistry is not particularly exciting, but it is particularly lucrative. And so being associated with a movie, being able to come be on set, being a part of making something creative can be very motivational to people that have money, but got their money in a way that isn't terribly exciting. And so being part of something more exciting can be very motivational for a funder. And so that's often how small projects, these independent projects, get made.
Well, in a way that's my story as well. Meaning, I'm not a rich dentist, but having made, I make my money in IT and in banking, not the most exciting place, and then I have this other, channel in my life, which is very creative. And I have the just
Exactly.
joy of working with people like Christian. Hi, Christian, editing, making this whole thing happen as well. Yeah. So one of the debates that I have with Christian a lot, and this is sort of part of the magic of our relationship, is the debate between the the creative art of the storytelling and the commercial reality of the genre and the sellability and audience identification. How do you balance that over time, or what's your, based in, having been in and near the industry for so long, how do you balance those tensions?
Yeah, it's interesting that you asked that, Chris, because one of the other truisms of filmmaking that you hear from a lot of people is that for your very first movie, you should put 12 people in a house and kill them, right? That making a horror film with a very limited number of locations is something where you've got, first of all, a very sympathetic audience. In other words, B level, C level horror is something that has an audience, even if it doesn't have celebrities, if it has other formulaic components to it, right? And so there are genres that have formulaic components that speak to their audience and therefore give you a de facto audience if you pull it off, if you're able to deliver on those formulaic elements. And so my very first movie, which is on Amazon right now, called Within the Darkness, was my attempt at pulling off the formulaic elements of a horror film, even though I don't really consider that to be my genre. And I think that's probably a mistake. In other words, ideally, the best way you're going to speak to an audience with your film creatively and commercially is if you're making a film for which you are, in fact, the target audience, because then you're likely to make the kind of film that will speak to them and therefore enjoy some commercial success. So my attempt to simply follow someone else's formula, I think, is fundamentally flawed. I think the film is fine, but I think that things that I did to make it more interesting to me made it less interesting to its ultimate audience. It's almost like I split the difference somehow,
Yeah.
and missed the mark.
Well, and again, this is why this is a tension. This is a dynamic between the two, and because if you're making it for yourself, and Christian and myself are kind of unique characters, so if we're making a movie only for ourselves, it's really made for an audience of one. But The Right Juice, which is our first feature that we made in a really traditional way and released in 2012, it had some named, like Lucia Moniz, who played Aurelia in Love Actually. Her face is very well known. She's actually a artist and performer in Portugal, and that's how we got it sold in Portugal. So it was sold theatrically in Portugal. The criticisms of the movie is that it really didn't hold to a genre, but it's also because we checked into making this movie that we wanted to make, and although we never made all our money back, we certainly made some. I don't think anybody regrets that project or that investment at all, ever. People are just still in love with it, and I think the power of the movie is because you could really see that it was made with passion. And then for me, maybe the gamesman in me is like, okay, well, now how do we do that by either reducing the cost or increasing the revenue to make this thing balance out a little bit. So your second feature, which is not yet released, I think, but it was the road movie, which was shot in a very, very creative way.
It just got released on Friday.
Okay. So that one was also released on Friday, and that one, I looked it up. It's called Meant to Be Broken.
Meant to Be Broken.
Can you share the story of that? So how did that, again, from ideation to released on Friday, how did that come to be?
Well, I personally find the process of starting from a blank page to write a script somewhat intimidating. I've written 2 books and many, many articles on software development, but I haven't written a feature-length screenplay from a blank screen. So I was going through a service called Inktip that has a bunch of screenplays that writers have made for sale, hoping to find one that I liked and that had the bones of a good story that I could then go in and modify and improve upon with the blessing of the author just as I did Within the Darkness. That's how Within the Darkness happened as well. And so I found a film which was essentially a road trip crime spree, and negotiated with the author, bought the script, and then proceeded to rewrite portions of it to suit my own taste. And it's sort of a dark comedy, which is definitely my genre. I am the audience for that. And we rewrote it, and then decided, because it was a road trip, that we might want to film it in an unusual way. I was partly motivated by this notion of publicity for a film. And so there have been films that have made it into Sundance because, for example, they were shot on iPhones, right? And so there's these other kinds of gimmicks that help make an independent film, one that would otherwise not be noticed, be noticed. And so my idea for a gimmick was, what if we actually did the road trip? What if we shot this, instead of looping around the Beltway in Washington, D.C., what if we started in the Northeast and drove all the way to Miami, where the climax of the film takes place, and make all of the journey and the stops along the way, all the locations, legitimate locations of those regions. It occurred to me that I could partner with Mark Rupert and the 48 Hour Film Festival to find award-winning filmmaking teams in cities along the way who could then supplement our core cast with additional players, locations, and crew, so that the number of people we needed to travel with was minimum. And then I could create a kind of a social media phenomena out of the filming of that movie. And that's what we ended up doing. We traveled from Amherst, Massachusetts, all the way to Miami over the course of 40 days. And with just our 3 leads and a minimal, and just a DP. And then we had cinematographers in every city, production managers in every city, and then cast an additional crew in every city in 13 cities along the way. And then we just did everything we could to kind of make it look like it was shot by the same person, and shot the movie out over the course of the road trip.
And I'm going to do a little plug here for Filmapalooza. And Filmapalooza is the annual global festival of all the 48-hour film projects around the world. This year it is, of course, online. It's virtual. In the show notes, we'll put a link to Mark Rupert's episode, where he tells all about the origin of the 48-hour film project, for which you've been a part of most or all of it, actually. So you can hear really about the 48-hour film project there. And there's going to be more to this this story that Jonathan will share with myself and a few other panelists on the 20th of March during Filmapalooza. So if people want to not only hear this story, but others from the filmmakers, then please join us for Filmapalooza. And you can also, once you get access, you can see a lot of the short films as well. It's just a fascinating place. So two things that triggered me was sort of the continuity of making it look like it was shot by the same people, and then the social media sort of storm that you're going for. So if we dive into those two, how did you make it look or feel like there was some continuity of style there? Because those are, again, I'm not a DP and not anywhere near an expert, but these are very personal actions. The fingerprint, the creative fingerprint is able to be seen. So how did you overcome that?
Right. Well, traveling with us along the way was the director and a director of photography. I mean, that's basically the answer, and the camera, right?
Okay.
So we shot with the Sony FS7 and brought along with us a director of photography who acted, if you will, as a kind of a caddy, right? So that all the cinematographers in each of these cities were golfers, and he would sort of look over their shoulder and say, what we've been doing this far is using this lens for this type of shot, and this is how we've been lighting it, and so kind of as a kind of coach, if you will, for these 48-hour cinematographers, and they all welcomed it because he was a very experienced cinematographer that really did the yeoman's work of bringing it all together and making it have a kind of continuity that it might not have otherwise had. And then I acted as director throughout the program. We didn't have different directors in different cities, and so that allowed for some continuity of style, camera movement, blocking, and things like that would happen. And you know, there's challenges, right? I mean, the teams were all very different in terms of what they brought to the table. I mean, some of them, you know, were really able to crew up. Others were 1 and 2 man operations, and so it really varied from city to city. But each one brought something unique and something special. And what I enjoyed most about it was the sort of local color of local businesses that participated, et cetera, so that these were real places in these real cities as we traveled.
What went wrong? What is one highlight of a disaster? If there's because or maybe nothing went wrong in 40 days. That could.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess you know, there's some instances in which there were surprises, and you know, we showed up and one team didn't have audio gear, for example, after saying that they did.
Okay.
So then we were scrambling. We didn't bring it, so then we were scrambling to find it that we could rent, you know, in order to get things shot. And we had a limited time in each city too, so that was a complexity. You know, but I think we learned a lot from it. Like what might have made sense would have been to send Kevin, the director of photography, ahead to each city so that we weren't kind of designing the layout of the shots in real time, but instead able to do a little more pre-production and storyboarding on what we were going to do. But there wasn't so much that went wrong per se, right? I think that everyone was enthusiastic and participating with it. And the actors were great. So, I mean, I think that there was no big disaster. There was a bed bugs incident at one of the motels we stayed at, and so we needed to move.
Yeah.
It was an Airbnb, and we had to move out of that and move into a motel in one city. But besides that, you know, it was work. It was a lot of work. But I don't know that there was any real disaster associated with it. Just exhaustion.
Exhaustion. Yeah. 40 days. It sounds like a hustle. It's like a marathon. You mentioned social media. What was the strategy for audience creation there? Meaning, because you know, you had small businesses, you had the 48s, you had your own networks. Was social awareness, as in social media awareness, part of that strategy, or what was the?
It was. And so, I mean, we you know, we made signs for the for our primary vehicle that had our Instagram handle on them, for example, so that people could see and look things up and join on. We ran a Kickstarter campaign to raise some of the money for it, and so that was primarily not for the money, but for the visibility and to get more people to be part of the social media. The underlying premise of the story came from the idea that there's a lot of really silly laws that are still on the books around the country, and I'm sure this is true in the Netherlands as well, that there are these state laws that existed for some reason in the past and now are still there but just aren't enforced. Like you're you know, not allowed to have ice cream in your back pocket in New York, or you're not allowed to fish with your hands in New Jersey, or have a camel in your bathtub in Arizona. There's just these strange laws. And so that provided a kind of a social media opportunity, in that we tried, as through social media, to break as many of these rules as possible as well. And the locals like helped us identify ones that we hadn't even heard of. I mean, up in Amherst, Massachusetts, there's like a city line that where this dirt from one city can't leave the city because it's supposed to be the most fertile dirt, and so we filmed ourselves stealing dirt across city lines and things like that, and that helped give some of the viral quality to it.
You evildoers, you.
Exactly.
And how did it work? So it's been released. What was it picked up? Meaning it was picked up for distribution, or is this a
Yeah, it was picked
self-release?
up for distribution. It's been released on Amazon thus far, but not. It went through a whole festival circuit.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I mean, what I really wanted, we shot it anamorphic, and so I really, really wanted to have a lot of people see it via DCP on widescreen, theatrical. We weren't going to get a theatrical release because we didn't have any stars in it, but we got it into festivals all along the path of the route, so that the people that were involved could see it in a movie theater. And we did really well in festivals, and won awards in just about all of them. And Best Picture in Sydney and in Berlin and Fort Lauderdale, and Best Comedy in other cities. And so it did well in the festival circuit. And then the distributor took it and put it into QC, and then the pandemic happened, and quality control was delayed by 9 months or something like that as a result of the pandemic. But it came out with a clean bill of health from quality control, and so then it just was released on Amazon, and it'll be on all the rest of the platforms very shortly. So you can find it now, Meant to Be Broken, on Amazon, and it's available in most countries.
Love it. I will. Amazon in the Netherlands just arrives, I guess, in a big way within the last year or so. So I'll check out, see if there's a link there. Starting to wrap up, if there is people listening that are able to answer your dream for the next project that you're looking to hatch in LA, what would be the best way that a person or persons could contribute to your work? So like if there's someone out there in the network, and there are filmmakers and things watching, so what would be the most helpful thing for you to happen?
Well, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, I guess I'm always most interested in reading scripts and cashing checks, right? Those are probably the two most important things that could be helpful. Is that somebody wants to be a part of producing it? That'd be exciting. And if somebody has a script that they're really excited about, I'm happy to read it. We may even try to do the same thing again on the West Coast of the United States, but I think I won't make any more movies without known cast. I think that's the next level. So I guess any relationships there would be helpful as well. But I mean, I think that's what I need to do to take my filmmaking to the next level, is make a movie with people I don't know, people that aren't all excited to be there. And so that's probably the thing that's most intimidating for me about my next project in Tampa, is that it will be a crew that I don't know, and for whom this is just a job as opposed to a dream come true, and a cast that I don't know, and a cast that might have I don't know, how should we say, high aspirations for how they should be treated. And so all of those things are going to be challenges that I have not yet had to deal with, right? Because I normally have surrounded myself with people that are just happy to be there. And that's a great and loving environment for making a film. And so when you bring into the mix people for whom this is just a job, I think that will change things dramatically. And I'll really have to have my act together to helm a film under those circumstances.
And I guess you will select people that probably resonate with, that vibe. I guess it won't be perfect because, of course, maybe these are, I don't know. I'm not claiming to be anything near an expert, but Filmland seems to be primarily contractors, and so it's not like people are working in a bank for 30 years and half dead. And so there seems to be some hustle in general, and there seems to be a camaraderie. So because if you're a complete a-hole, then you don't get invited back. So it's no, I'm really curious when you do it. I'd love to hear afterwards if if it was maybe as hard as you thought, or maybe it was much easier than you might be thinking it is now. Yeah.
I mean,
Cool.
it might be. I mean, it's interesting because my producer friend says that you need to start every film by firing someone and rule by fear in a way.
Hmm.
And yet Olivia Wilde, I don't know if you're familiar with her, pretty well-known actress and now director of a film that was well received called Booksmart. She's completely refusing that model, and she said that I'm only firing people for acting up. I'm not going to arbitrarily fire somebody in order to rule by terror. I'm literally going to, even if it's the biggest star in the film, I'm going to fire them if they don't cooperate. And so those are sort of two different perspectives, and I'm
Hmm.
more inclined to Olivia Wilde's point of view than I am my friend that thinks that I just need to pick somebody and fire them at the beginning.
Hmm.
Show that I'm willing to do it, right? Might not even be a real person. You just need to make a show of firing someone. And I don't know if
I don't, for some reason, I don't think that
kind of
rule by,
theatrics are for me. Right?
I don't, but just knowing you for 30 minutes now, I don't think your personality is the type of rule by fear, just by the glint in your eye and the joy in your face. So maybe you take
Well, I
evil.
can make my voice even lower and sterner, though, Chris,
Yeah.
so that it's more threatening and more,
You've got the evil eye as well. You got
exactly, so I can be Orson Welles if I need to be.
And last question, because I just can't resist not asking it. What software were you championing in Washington, D.C.? So was that a language or a package, or you wrote 2 books about software? What is the area of specialty?
So the only time that I've actually championed software was a piece of client-server software development that came out of Paris, actually, that was called Object View, where I became sort of the world's expert on this client-server development tool for Windows 3. But what I ended up writing about most was writing software in a program called Visual Basic. And then after that, there was a product that came from Borland called Delphi, which was essentially a visual Pascal language. And so those are the things about which I did most of my writing and speaking around the world, including in the Netherlands. My first trip to the Netherlands was to Bad Hoeverdorp for a Visual Basic conference where I came to speak. So it's led me to see a lot of the world. So programming was a fun part of my life for sure.
Bad Hoeverdorp, just outside the airport. And what is it? Windows 3.1.1 for work groups.
Exactly.
The good days, I guess. So right on. Jonathan Zuck, thank you so much. And again, for people listening, if they want to hear more, Filmapalooza is on the 18th to the 21st, I think, of March online. Filmapalooza.org, I believe. In any case, we'll put it in the show notes. And on Saturday, the 20th of March, you can hear Jonathan and other filmmakers, directors, and producers getting interviewed by Mark Rupert, one of the co-founders of 48 Hour Film Project, about 48 alumnus who have, made the leap and made features. So, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite player, and download the Simplicity Kit from ebullient.com.